paradox of plenty. The name appears very interesting, but what actually is it? Now, this is a kind of resource trap. So, wherever you have bountiful natural resources, despite of having bountiful natural resources, there is a stagnation in economic activities that is seen. And this is what is the paradox of plenty. So, let's understand this in certain detail. So, paradox of plenty is also known as resource curse or resource trap. Now, this is a situation where a country specializes in one of the activities. So let's say oil is one of the activities that the country is engaged in. Venezuela, Angola are good examples. Venezuela from South America, Angola from Africa are good examples which are oil bestowed nations. Now these nations have been developing exceptionally for oil, but what has been witnessed in long run is there has been an economic stagnation despite the fact that there has been ample of oil drill that have been seen. Why? There have been numerous reasons for it. One of the obvious reasons that we can understand is, what if the resource is non-renewable? It would come to an end on one day, and at that point of the time the country would not have ample of resources and ample of other activities in which it has been involved, and therefore economic stagnation is very obvious. The second is the political reasons that are associated to it. The third is the issue of corruption. Sometimes there is changing trend. Now, a good example to explain the changing trend pattern, I would say, is not that perfect example, but a simple example where watches were a kind of common utility thing in the past. Switzerland boomed a lot because of watches, but what if Switzerland would not diversify itself besides the watches and keep on producing watches? Over the years, watches, the role of watch has been substituted with what? Definitely mobile phones coming in, so no more need to have a watch here. So what would happen is there would be a change in the trend that is there. Now this change in the trend would definitely affect the demand. So if a country is exclusively dependent on one thing, it would be underperforming in economic scenario in long run. So that is how a resource curse or a resource trap occurs, and this is what is called as paradox of plenty. Despite of the fact that there is plentiful resource that is there is economic stagnation that is seen. So what is a best way in order to rule this out? So the best way obviously is to provide diversification. So rather than just keeping yourselves confined to mining activities, there could be oil drilling activities, there could be service sector that could be developed, agriculture, forest-based industries that could be developed. So diversification is something that is very important. Sometimes it so happens that some of the countries are able to diversify, and those who are able to diversify are able to withstand the economic turmoil, but those countries which are not able to diversify are unable to stand the forces. So let's take good examples here. So we have three important examples. One is the example from Venezuela, the next one is an example from Angola, and the third one is an example from Saudi Arabia. All of these three nations are the nations where we have seen oil resources. Now, Angola has been home to nearly 30 million people, and oil contributes to 90% of the exports. Now, what has been the scenario? So, since there has been 90% of the export of the oil, Angola did not ever thought about diversifying itself, and all of the nation wealth was relying on a single source. What was the single source? Definitely oil. So there was definite resource surplus that was seen in these three regions. Now let's understand how over the years the things and the scenario changed. Now Angola over the years could not do well. Initially, all of these regions got rich, but what happened over the years? Over the years, there was a resource curse that was seen. Now, what happened with this resource curse? Two of the regions that were there, Venezuela and Angola, struggled because of the because of the resource curse. And in Venezuela, there were sanctions from America. There were different reasons for Angola as well. But whatsoever the reason be, at some point of time, there would be exhaustion of the oil reserves as well. And therefore, if the country is solely dependent on one form, then their economy would stagnate at some point of time, when as soon as there is an imbalance in the demand supply curve that is seen. But the same scenario if we witness for Saudi Arabia, the Saudi Arabia witnessed a quick recovery. Why there was a recovery in Saudi Arabia, is very important. Now Saudi Arabia had an interesting history. In 2010, nearly 80% of the income was dependent on oil. However, in 2018, if we look on to very recent data, we have seen only 55% of the export that was dependent on oil. That means there was value addition where towards the manufacturing sector, towards alternative sources of energy, green fuel as a prerogative. So we have a new city being built in Saudi Arabia as Neom city, and this Neom is a city where green hydrogen is considered as one of the basic fuels that would be used. So also, it's not just that oil has been declining in reserves. There are frequent fluctuations in the global oil price that could be responsible for a decline in the country's growth, economic stagnation on the countries relying solely on oil, for example. So there could be decline in the oil prices. There could be a substitute, a change in the trend where people start to move from the non-renewable sources towards renewable sources. Probably it could be solar, it could be wind, or any alternative source of energy. For example, in the Neom city, it is green hydrogen, people moving towards ethanol blended fuels. So there has been a decline in the consumption, there has been decline in the prices, then obvious corruption that grows in, as you have most of the resources that are localized with one sector. So there is another important issues, and when it comes to international relations, definitely sanctions impositions are another problems that come up. So when there is so this is where you have the paradox of plenty, which is also known as the resource curse or the resource trap. In order to fight with this, what is required is a quick recovery, and this recovery can come through diversification, as we have seen with the case of Saudi Arabia. So understanding what is paradox of plenty is very important. Knowing that despite of the fact that the region is bestowed with natural resources, it is not growing economically. There is an economic stagnation that occurs in the region. So we would be covering many more lectures in economics. Stay tuned. Have a wonderful day ahead.